When were you born?
I was born on August 15th, 1924,
All right. Where were you born?
in Brooklyn, New York.
When did you join the military?
I joined the military right after, in 1943, when we were in the middle of a war with Nazi Germany.
All right. Which country do you think was the main cause of the war?
The main cause of the war was a personality called Adolf Hitler, who wanted to, he felt that Germany was always maltreated, and he thought that they got a raw deal at the end of World War One, and he was gonna right the wrong as he saw them, and he thought that they were the superior race, and they should have more of the world's properties than they had.
All right. What caused you to join the military?
I, at that time, there was a thing called conscription, where all young men had to register, and they could be conscripted or drafted into the military. And I had my own plans for going into the military. I wanted to be an aviation cadet and get into an airborne crew and fly rather than fight as a foot soldier, which I thought was not too attractive.
Well, that actually answers my next question, which is why did you choose the Air Force?
Okay, well that
That's
that's part of it. So to be an aviation cadet, you had to be accepted by a committee of Air Force people, and they insisted first of all you had top grades in your class, so you had to be a good student, and then I had another roadblock, because I would not have graduated until it was time for me to make a decision on conscription. And I didn't want to be conscripted and have to go in as a foot soldier. So I had to accelerate my education in high school. So I took double courses in my last year of high school, so I could finish off high school in 3.5 years rather than 4 years. So I got out in time so where I could join the aviation cadets rather than going into being drafted as a foot soldier.
All right. What do you think was the main consequence of the war, in your opinion?
The main consequence of the war was that Nazi Germany's evil empire was thwarted. They were terrible in many ways for everybody.
Yeah. All right. What was the consequence of you joining the military?
It was a valuable experience. It was a trying time. It put me under stress, and I had to learn to deal with it and to handle it. And I learned a lot of technical items. As a result of that, I decided to become an engineer. And I had some early training in engineering subjects in the military.
All right. So, what were the main consequences of your actions during the war?
Of what?
The main consequences of your actions during the war.
My actions. Well, my actions, I could not talk of individual actions, but as part of the Air Force, I think that we controlled the tempo of the war and the outcome of the war by being able to hit the Germans all over their territory, and we gradually ground them down.
All right. So, what were the sacrifices made by the U.S. during the war?
know, people had a harsh environment during the war. They had to have rationing. They couldn't buy all the food they really wanted. They couldn't buy gasoline, so you couldn't use your car. You could only use your car for very necessary trips because you would only be allowed about 5 gallons a week, and that didn't last long. So you couldn't take trips, and there wasn't enough. When the men went off the war, there wasn't enough labor to produce produce weapons of war. So the women had to go into the factories to manufacture products of war. Those women were called Rosie the Riveters.
All right. What did you sacrifice to join the military?
Pardon? What was that?
What did you sacrifice to join the military?
Well, I didn't sacrifice anything. I delayed my career plans. That was the main thing.
All right. What did other countries sacrifice during the war?
Well, I'm thinking back. I did sacrifice a little. I wasn't able to earn money, and I would have had to rely on my parents. So, in that sense, I did have to sacrifice.
All right. What did other countries sacrifice to in the war?
Other countries?
Yeah.
They all pretty much had the same problems. They all had to buckle down and get by with less, ration foods, and put everyone to work. Those that weren't healthy enough to go into the military had to go into factories and fields, farming.
Right. What was your perspective on the war?
My perspective on the war is that it is a war that it had to be, because Adolf Hitler was a dictator who was very strong in control, and he was determined to take over the world. And he took over most of Europe, and he was on his way to doing what he wanted to do. And it was important to stop him, which we did. And if we hadn't, who knows what would have been.
Right. What do you think the president's perspective was on the war?
Come again? What was that?
What do you think the president's perspective was on the war?
The present perspective on the war?
Yeah, the president's perspective on the war.
The president,
Which president?
at that time?
During the time.
Oh, yes.
No.
That was Franklin.
That was Franklin Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
He, I think he was always for the war. He wanted to get into the war before we were really provoked. And he did everything he could to, I think, to aggravate the situation so that we could accelerate our getting into the war. Because he thought that Nazi Germany had to be stopped, and he wanted to do his part. And he thought his part was to get the United States into the war with Germany.
All right. What do you think, like, the average German citizen's perspective was on the war?
Initially, a lot of them thought that they were doing the right thing because they had been given a raw deal after World War I, and since then, and they felt oppressed in all the trade sanctions and policies against them by the rest of the European countries. So they thought that it was right to correct that. And then when they started to win over all these territories, they thought that's great, we'll expand Germany. But eventually when the war settled down to be a draw, and when it started to go against them, then the Germans wanted out of it. They were had enough.
Alright, so what environments did you see in the war?
My environment in the war was that of attack from the air. I was in a B-17 bomber crew, and we used to have groups of 1,000 planes at once fly over Germany, over northern Italy, over the Balkans, over the Rhineland, the deep part of Germany, and as far as Berlin, and drop millions of tons of bombs on them. And that accelerated the collapse of the German Empire, because we could bomb their railroad yards so that they could never transport anything. We bombed their oil refineries so they didn't have any oil for their tanks and armored vehicles. And the fire bombs that we dropped on the cities caused them very, very much grief, and it caused the German population at least to want to quit the war.
Alright, so what did the bombs do to the environment?
Pardon?
What did the bombs do to the environment?
What the bombs do?
Yeah, to the environment.
Yeah. Well, the bombs were good and bad. They were good because it was an efficient way of destroying the Nazi war machine. It was bad because you couldn't avoid damaging important historical structures. A lot of the famous churches in the world were destroyed. And a lot of museums and artworks. So there's a lot of collateral damage done to the infrastructure and art centers of Germany, which probably could have been somewhat avoided if they took more care, but at that time we just wanted to win the war.
Alright. What was the environment like inside of a plane?
Inside of a plane, well, you started out at 6 a.m. in the morning. You attended a briefing where you were told in a secret hangar what the mission was, the secret details of the mission. And you were told where you were going to fly to and what you were going to bomb. And then we took off, and it took about 6 or 7 hours of flying before we got there. And when we got there, we were encountered by the German fighter aircraft that tried to shoot us down. We had our own fighter escorts, and in our particular case in Italy, and the 15th Air Force, we had fighters from the Tuskegee Airmen. You probably heard of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah.
They were an all-black squadron. They started out initially as a test group to see if blacks were smart enough to learn how to fly. And they were smart enough, and they were also very efficient. And they got to be the best pilots in the Air Force. So we had them to escort us, and they used to shoot down the German fighters that came to attack us. Then when we got closer to the target, then we had to consider anti-aircraft fire. The anti-aircraft fire was high explosive bombs that they shot up at us, and they had proximity fuses, so they went got close enough to the airplane, they would explode the bazillions of pieces. And the pieces would, if they hit the engine of the airplane, it would wipe out the engine. And once the engines are wiped out, then you'd go down. So we used to lose quite a few airplanes to anti-aircraft fire. When we had a bad raid, we'd lose maybe 30% to 40% of the number of planes we had. So if, and out of that, we'd, about half of them would go to the German fighter planes, shooting us down with cannons, and the other half would go to the anti-aircraft batteries that were at the target.
Alright. How is being in the Air Force an honor to the U.S.?
What?
How is being in the Air Force an honor to the U.S.?
Let's say again.
An honor.
An honor?
Yeah. How is being in the Air Force an honor to the U.S.?
Oh. Well, it was considered to be the branch of the military that did the most to cripple Nazi Germany to where they couldn't fight anymore and had to give up. Once we won the Battle of the Air, then we could bomb them at will and inflict terrible damage. So being in the Air Force, you knew you had a very valuable job and you were doing a good hearty effort to kill Nazi Germany.
Right. What did your family think of you being in the Air Force?
They had mixed emotions. They didn't like the idea that I was going to be shot at. And at that time, we were also at war with Italy, and my family was Italian. So a lot of Italians didn't think that we should be bombing Italy. But we did early on in the campaign, do a lot of bombing in Italy and damage a lot of Italy. So, but my particular immediate family understood it pretty well. And they also understood that when I got there through Africa, most of the campaign had moved north of the Apennine Mountains, so that I didn't do much damage to the places in Italy where their parents came from.
So, did you know what you were fighting for?
We always had a good idea of what we were fighting for, yes, and most of us supported the war.
Did you listen to music?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
What kind of music did you listen to?
Oh, music of the 40s, things like Glenn Miller was a popular band, Artie Shaw, Ray Anthony, and it was jitterbug music like In the Mood.
Alright.
There was a lot of nice, peaceful waltz dance type music.
Did you face any discrimination?
No, I did not.
Okay. How long did you have to train before being allowed to fly in a mission?
It was a long process. We were an aviation cadet for about 6 months, and that was all schoolwork. We went to school